I brought my sound bowl, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you want to do it before we start the session.
No problem. Let's do a sound bowl. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, very unique way of beginning our little podcast. I've never done a podcast with a sound bowl intro and stuff.
Well, that's your first time.
Yes. Okay, why not you explain to everybody what are we doing? What are we looking at? Where do you get this? Why do we do this? All right.
So this is a Tibetan sound bowl. Usually I realize that, when I'm doing podcast or doing a workshop at the beginning, I would like to usually use a sound bowl because it helps to calm down the nervous system. It helps you to be more present as well. So I felt like it was something that was very effective for me. And ever since then, it's like before I started
Where do you buy this from?
I got it from a shop in Chinatown.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And what drew you to this sound bowl? Or like how do you test the sound bowl to know that?
Usually you test for resonance. So there are very, very cheap sound bowls to like really expensive sound bowls. So the cheaper ones is like they have a very sharp and jarring sound to it.
And so you tap it or you use the stick or?
You use the stick, yeah.
Oh, they have a stick there?
Yeah.
Oh,
the
okay,
stick. So you can try. So the more expensive sound bowls, it's kind of like the Ferrari range to me. It's like when you tap it, it just sounds really nice. It sounds very resonant.
Where do you find sound bowls?
There are quite a few shops in Singapore selling them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ken, let's go.
Okay, so shall we do a quick meditation before we start?
No problem.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, so just find a comfortable position
All
and
right.
close your eyes. Okay, and just take a deep breath in all the way into your tummy. And just slowly exhaling through your nose. Taking in one more inhale. And slow exhale. And just one last time. Feeling yourself just being here in this present moment in time. And whenever you're ready, open your eyes.
Wow, very nice. Let me take a picture. Next time I start podcast, we do sound bowl. Okay, very good. Okay, so very unique way of starting. So guys, this is Mel right here. I have done a lot of podcasts over the years, and I don't usually have a name for the podcast. I just find interesting people with interesting ideas and just ask them to share. I think a lot of people are very concerned with how a podcast is branded and stuff. But I think at the end of the day, it's just it all comes down to the intention, the people you bring, and the ability to have them share a lot of great ideas also. So this is why we have Bibi here today. I think Bibi has I've known Bibi along the years through different evolutionary stages. She used to work with one of the investment education companies. That's probably where I first met her. And she was doing good work there. Eventually she came out and I knew her as a marketer and a growth marketer. It's kind of interesting, which I thought, okay, this is cool. We don't have a lot of marketers, female marketers, that many in the space, and she was doing some good work with some investing teachers or so. Then came the very interesting change and pivot where she moved towards just packing the bags up and just being a nomadic lifestyle also. And of course that caught my eye because I live nomadically also. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. Why would she choose to do that? Most of the people living in Singapore do not embark on that kind of thing. They would probably just go to Bangkok a while, go to Japan. But then, she just like, okay, fuck it. She moved and, I thought that was cool. And then I think when she came back, so that's like the third or fourth evolution, right? Because she kind of disappeared for a while. But when she came back, then, she started to get into a space of, being more intuitive, being helping people listen to their feelings, be able to tap into their energy, their aura, and a bunch of different things also, which I thought was really interesting. And I think these days now there's probably the fifth evolution where she's actually guiding and helping people through that also. So we have seen the many faces of Bibi, which is very interesting. So this is the latest version.
Latest and probably the final version.
Oh, I don't know where to. I very open. I see five different versions already. So that's fine. But I want Bibi to come specifically to share a few things also because through your story, I think there are a lot of concepts that you have experienced and probably crystallized also that I think are useful to people who are either self-employed, wanting to start something, and feeling a internal resistance, towards making those things happen. In the coaching space also, There are a lot of people who want to start businesses, and a lot of them would say, "I want to sign up for a marketing coaching, or a person teach me about funnels, or ads, or offers, or this kind of thing." It's always external, which is cool. I'm saying there are quite a lot of coaches in the space teaching that kind of stuff. But at the same time, some of these people don't go on to do a lot of stuff also. It's because they have internal resistance. Could be an identity issue, could be some things they have not closed off. It could be, energetically they want it, but self-sabotage also. So, they learn all these materials, have all this stuff, but then, proceed on to do not much with it also. So I think just for our conversation today, I think it's very worthwhile to talk about the internal stuff also, the identity, the struggles, the chapters that people must close,
Yeah.
the things they must let go of. For a rebirth to happen, you got to burn something, let go of something for something to be created.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are resistant to burning. There's something, and we're shooting this close to Chinese New Year, so if you don't clear the place, then you got no space for new stuff.
This is the perfect time to close off whatever that is like left before the new year begins, actually.
There we go. So very quickly, why don't you share 1-2 minutes, a few minutes on what would you identify yourself as right now, and how did you come to this space, so that you have a bit of understanding about your journey, and then we can go into some of your self-realized concepts.
Okay, so today I am the founder of The Modern Human, and I actually started this because, when I was building my startup in the past, I was building a startup for about 3 years. We did like really, really well. And eventually like I burnt out, and like what Melvin said, I just decided that, screw it, I'm just gonna like pack up and leave. And that really brought me on a crazy, crazy journey. Like I thought I was just gonna be, on a sabbatical for like maybe 1 to 2 months, but it really dragged out to be 1.5 years instead. And the reason why it took so long, I mean, I did try to come back to Singapore. I tried to go back to work, but basically everything I worked on just basically burned to the ground. And I just kept hearing this voice that came to me and said like, hey, you're not ready yet, you're not ready yet. And I was like, okay, fine, I'm not ready yet. So I'm just gonna escape to New Zealand, which has been on my bucket list as like the #1 country for a really long time. Why? It's just you can't explain it. It's just a pool. It's just a place that I've been wanting to visit. At first I thought like it was really beautiful.
It is beautiful, by the way.
You've been there,
Yeah,
right?
I've been there before.
You've been there. It's so beautiful.
For nature, very almost untouched.
Almost untouched. Yes, I would say that. And I would say that the energy of the place is very raw. It's not like, places like Bali where there's like tourists
A bit
everywhere,
commercialized.
overcrowded. Yeah, so it's a great place for you to kind of like slow down, your pace of life. And taking that trip was life-changing for me in a sense that because everything is so slow, there's nothing to work for, there's nothing to hustle, there's nothing to, rush from like workshop to workshop. There's just you, yourself, and your own internal voice, or what you call intuition. And then I was there for like another 1.5 years. And that's when I became very, very connected to my intuition. And when I came back to Singapore, I just started observing people. And just so happened that, I was just, because I was so connected with my intuition, and then suddenly I was just so energetically sensitive to everything around me. So when I came back to Singapore and I was like looking at my friends, looking at how everyone is like tired and burnt out, and I just felt like everything, like the reason this happens is because all their energy is being poured into all these external things, which they think that it make them fulfilled or happy. And I also know like a lot of people who are like high performers, or maybe even people who are running like millions and millions of dollars of business, and they just feel this sense of, on the outside they look very successful, but on the inside, they feel like something is kind of like off. And that's when I realized like, oh, actually it's all about that internal alignment. Because what society has brought up or brought for us to believe is that, okay, we need to have like all these things in order for us to be successful, but actually we've got it we've got it completely wrong. It's actually the other way. It's about finding their own internal alignment and moving towards that direction. And then that's when, all the external things will fall into place.
Let's talk about 3-4 things you just mentioned. Where do you find the people who are burnt out? Where are they pouring their energy into?
I think a lot of their energy is, okay, I think like mainly 2 groups of people. The first group, which is the corporate people, where they've been working for quite a few number of years, climbing the career corporate ladder. After a while, they just start to realize that these could be people who maybe in their early 30s to like their late 30s, where they've been in the game for quite a while. They're also going through the phase of life where like, okay, I'm earning money, I'm more financially stable right now. Maybe I have a house, maybe I have a kid, maybe I have a car. But then they're starting to realize like, hey, why does this still feel so, it doesn't feel like me, you know? I feel like I want to like go out to explore. Maybe I should quit my job. They're always going home very tired, might have arguments with their partner. So these are the kind of things that, you know, they could be going through. And then on the other hand, there are business owners. So there are, within business owners itself, there are business owners who maybe have sold their companies, or they have kind of like decided to like pivot into something else, you know, close down the new one and then start something else. There is still, when I look at their energy, there's still this constant chase of like, okay, I need to build a big business, I need to generate like revenues, I need to do something so that I can feel successful. It's still a very external sense of validation. And then there is the third kind of group, which is this group of business owners where they've been running their business for a long time, maybe like 7, 8, 10 years, or maybe even more. And they're starting to feel a sense of like, you know, this is something that I've worked on for such a long time. It's like my pride and joy. I put in so much blood, sweat, and tears into it, but it just doesn't feel like my baby anymore. And it's also because their energy has been projecting like outwards, and it's not so much like, imagine if your business is alive, if it has its own consciousness, it's like a real child of yours, right? And if you were to have a conversation with this child, would this child feel happy or would it feel neglected? Because all you've done is just, you know, go out like all the time versus like spending time to understand how you can nurture this child further.
No, that's very interesting concept. So you open different things here we can talk about. Let's talk about the first one, where the corporate people, right? So would you say that to a large degree, the people who work in a lot of these jobs, right, they have been sold a system, a blueprint, you know, and perhaps they were just good boys and good girls and they followed what society or their parents or their teachers said, and you know, they embark on a certain blueprint. You are supposed to finish this degree, you're supposed to therefore fight to get this company, and they follow the blueprint only to realize, hey, wait a minute, I don't think the blueprint was A, designed by me, and B, makes me very happy. Would you say that?
So I would say that it's important to understand where this system even came from. So right now we live in a world of capitalization, right? Where, you know, it's always about how much output, how productive you are, and how much revenues we can generate. And while it has helped the society to progress in terms of like, you know, the GDP and the income that we make and the lifestyles that we can afford, I think this whole process has taken away the humanity of who we are, because we are being treated like machine, a cog in the wheel, for us to just keep going and going and going. And there's no such thing as like, you know, oh, I need to take a break, I need to take a rest. And even sometimes, you know, some people, when they take a break or they take a rest, they feel like guilty. Like, I'm not supposed to be doing this. And society has conditioned us so well in this way that we just feel like we have to keep going and going and going. But the true nature of us human beings is that we are not machines. We are not made to keep going and going and going and going, because that's just not how we function. There's so much dimension. I mean, we are multi-dimensional creatures. There's so many other things to us than just like work. And I think it's really important to explore these other areas of ourselves.
And I think the blueprint was not created, is created by whoever is out there just to keep society going. And I don't think it's designed to make people very happy also.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them have followed the blueprint only to realize that the blueprint is either incomplete or not designed by them for their own level of happiness. Right? So I think the second one is business people who are on perhaps a similar path, not exactly the same, and they are chasing revenue and millions of dollars in order to feel like, okay, when I hit this thing, I'll be happy. But then they either come close or they even hit it and realize it doesn't make them happy. What do you realize?
I have another thing to add to that, is that if let's say they have a certain revenue target in mind and they don't hit it or the revenue keeps going down, then they will start to question their self-worth.
And then even if they hit it, then they also don't feel
Yeah.
as happy also, because it's like, they'll feel like
Yeah.
that. Then then the brain's like, okay, you must hit another target.
Yeah.
So you don't hit, you're screwed. You hit also, you don't feel like very, very joyful.
Yeah.
Why do you think that happens?
So I think it has to do with the effects of capitalism, where, do you know there's this very popular term where people refer to their business as something cow?
Cash cow?
Yes,
Yeah.
as a cash cow.
Uh.
So I feel like a lot of business owners, they always refer to my business as a cash cow. I want my business to become a cash cow. Looking at your business, identifying your business as a cash cow basically dehumanizes the entire process of even building a business. Why do you even want to build a business in the first place? And how I see it is that a business is meant to be an extension of who you are. And when you narrow it down to just, oh, this is a cash cow, it's a machine that is going to like churn out money for me, passive income, and I'm just going to be happy and all that. I don't see it that way. And I feel like business is meant to be a sacred container where you step in to be the best version of yourself. And it's about who you become in the process, and it's not so much about who you are. I mean, who you are is important, but it's like, it's not, should I put this? It's important for you to understand that the journey is about you. It's not about how much revenues you make and all that, but everybody tied their identity and self-worth to that.
You mentioned just now, like, it's kind of interesting to think of a business also as a baby that you have a conversation with and interact with. And I think this is pretty fascinating. I think there's a lot of things we can explore here. There are people who think about their business as a machine. Then there's people that regard it as a cow for it to feed their lifestyle. Then there are people that build it as a masterpiece or even cultivate and grow it as a baby or so. What do you think is the significance of all these labels, which then ties into the attitude you see it? And what do you think, like, you feel is the most optimal frame by which people should regard their business? It's kind of interesting. It's like having children. Like, some people see a child as a blessing. Some people see as a child as extension of them, and a child's job is to fulfill all the dreams they have never achieved as a parent before. Some people see the child as a machine. Oh, there, get good grades. So these are the different frames. So, but the frame by which you see the business, and in my analogy, the child, will dictate the way you treat it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, which is the most ideal, and what do you see?
I feel like, people who treat businesses as a cash cow, I mean, everyone has their own like perspective, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, bringing that sense of awareness of how you are showing up in your business day to day. So I used to work for a company which treated the business like a cash cow. And as a result of that, the leadership itself he was basically treating everyone like a soldier, like machines to like operate. And when the revenues were not going as well as expected, and he would just like lash out on everybody. I just feel like it doesn't contribute to people's growth, and just how can people step into a better version of themselves, because it was always about, in a very more crude way, I would say that it's almost like worshipping the money that comes in.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's no longer, you don't care about the people anymore. There's no such thing as like, a relationship building and things like that. Although sometimes they may do it just kind of like for show kind of thing, to just make the employees feel good. But at the end of the day, if you see your business as a machine, you're just taking the life out of it. It's like when artists, when I look at them like perform or like do their art, they're just so in the moment. They just love what they do so much that eventually, whatever happens, they just kind of like surrender to the process, and like whatever happens, it comes to them. But if, let's say, you're treating it as a machine, it's like, and if the machine doesn't perform, and then you start to have a lot of this, start questioning your self-worth. And so where I kind of like feel that, where do you draw the line, right? So, or what's the most ideal framework for this is, I feel like whatever that you want to start, it has to start with the internal alignment. I'm not saying that the external is not important. It actually is very important, but you need to understand what are the foundations that you build your business on. So if you begin with this internal alignment, like, this is what I feel like I need to be doing, this is what I feel like I need to be contributing, not because I see other people, oh, they're very successful, bubble tea, them successful, I also want to go and run this business. Yeah, it's not because of like, wow, this person earns so much money, I also want to go and do this, I just want to go and copy the person. All these things are all external. You want to turn inwards and say like, okay, I feel like this is the path that I need to walk. I feel like I can help humanity, or like help a group of people, or maybe it's just a way for me to figure out who I am. Maybe it's a way for me to step into a bigger version of myself. Therefore, I do this.
I think people who see their business as maybe a masterpiece, a work of art, or even a
Yes.
baby, right? I think it's very different. It was a work of art, but in some way the frame is very similar. When they see it as a masterpiece, a reflection of self, an expression of themselves, or a work of art that, like a Michelangelo statue that they want to chip and carve and create something amazing, or a baby though that they want to grow and cultivate and bring to fruition. That's always a much healthier frame.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's because when you see your business as a piece of art, as like really your child, your baby, you pour in so much love into it. And love is one of the most powerful emotions that we can experience as humans. And one thing that I've noticed recently changing as well, in terms of business and marketing, is that when we are operating from our hearts, when we are pouring so much love in, people can feel that. And I'm starting to realize and notice that the way that I spend and invest my money into teachers is not so much about where the marketing bros will be like, oh, you have to like fake the scarcity, you have to like push people and all that. It's very fear driven. But love is a very attraction based thing. So recently, I had one of the events with my client, and at the end of the event, there was a participant that came up to me and she chatted with me, and she was like, I really wanted to skip today's session.
Yo.
I didn't want to come because I was so tired from work. I had to like OT, and I gave myself like 100 reasons why I shouldn't be coming. But she said at the end of the day, she felt that her heart pulled her there, and it was a feeling that she couldn't ignore, and that's why she decided to come. And the world is going to be changing. People can feel all these things, whether you're being genuine, whether you're treating them like a cash cow, or you're really like pouring your heart because you love this work so much that you want it to like impact.
I think that is sorely absent. I think the people who treat their work as a labor of love, I think people are gonna do really well. And I'm glad we had this conversation also, because then So what happens if you mentioned the third category? Someone's been growing the business a while, right? And maybe it's like a relationship also. Sometimes things start, sometimes things end, and they realize the business right now they used to love has probably grown to a stage where they either no longer love, or it's become a form that they're like, well, I'm not sure if this is the form that I want to continue in. So what happens there?
Yeah. So when we are a bit younger, when we try to start things, there is certain conditioning that is going on in terms of like, okay, maybe you feel a draw to start this because you love being an entrepreneur, or maybe it's like if let's say somebody runs like a marketing company, it's really because they love the art of like marketing.
Yeah.
But the thing is that it's also for us to understand like, okay, when we first started this business, I want to understand whether this initial spark, was it truly from you, or was it because the society said that, okay, this is something that you can try, or like you can earn more money? Because there are people who, it's like, wow, copywriting, running ads can earn a lot of money, so I will go into it. So it wasn't truly genuinely what they wanted to do. It was because of the money. So these are the group of people where, they're starting to realize that, hey, actually this is not me. And that's the reason why they feel that way. And then there are some people who genuinely love what they do, but over time, we just have to recognize that we are moving through different seasons of our life. We're moving through different chapters, and what has worked in the past may not work for you right now because you're changing and growing always as a person. Like even for me, you've seen like so many different versions of me, and it's just really embracing that because we are not just human doings, we are human beings. So it's important for us to embrace this multidimensionality part of us and not just be like, oh, I'm a machine, I can only be a BB who is a scientist, or like who is only a marketer and I have to do this for the rest of my life. It doesn't work that way.
Oh, how should people think about the stages and the evolution if they find that, hey, you know what, I think this stage has kind of closed, right? And that's why I kind of reached out, because you had some great ideas in terms of closing like chapters. But I think even before you decide to close a chapter, you must accept that there are chapters and there are times when something ends or so, and that but something ending doesn't mean
It's the end.
It's the end.
Yes.
There's an opening or something else or so. So how should people regard it? And what should they do in order to close a chapter so they can begin a new chapter?
Yeah, I like to think of our lives as it's happening in seasons. I think this is something that I believe like the Chinese astrology 八字, right? You have different pillars of your life and you move through like these different seasons. And you know, how the season look is going to look different for everybody. But you just kind of know when things starting to like, it doesn't feel quite right, things are starting to like drag, then you know like, okay, roughly that there is something there that needs to be surfaced up for you to look at. But what a lot of people do is they just try to like mental willpower themselves out to just grind harder. You know, it's like, oh, I'm not working hard enough. Let's go and do something more. But actually, it's important to understand that like, okay, take a pause and just, you know, just have a reflection and just be brutally honest with yourself. You know, is this truly what I want to do? Is this in alignment with me? Does this help to support where I want to go? Or have I been so focused on you know, working on this and like growing my business that I forgotten who I want to be already, or what my future is going to look like? So what's the second question?
So how should they think about it? And the second is, how should they go about like closing that chapter mentally? Or do they like speak to
Right.
people? Do they wrap it up like energetically, maybe relationally? Like
Okay. Yeah. So when you decide chapter needs to end is when you don't have the energy for it anymore. When, like for example, if I use a relationship for an example, right? It's like you can have lots of arguments, you know, when you're young and fresh, you have a lot of energy to like go through all these things. But then over time, as things become heavier and heavier, you just run out of gas. You just run out of energy completely. And I feel like that's usually the best gauge of like when a chapter should probably be closing. And maybe it's that there's something new that you feel like you want to work on, or like a project that it's kind of like making your heart like interested, or like you just feel some sort of like magnetic pull towards it, but you still have this past that is trying to, you know, like show up. That's when I feel like it's the best time. Like you're stuck in the middle basically. You're stuck in the middle for quite a while, and you feel like you can't progress. That's when you know that the chapter needs to end. And in order to close chapters, there are many ways to do it. Personally, for me, is in my program, it's a very specific 21 days. I bring people through a ritual. So it depends on, you know, how deep you are into the chapter that you need to close. Is it something that was very traumatic, or it was very like emotional for you, or people face some sort of like abandonment? So it really depends on how deep that they are into it. You know, it could be as simple as like, you know, revisiting the past and like giving yourself, revisiting the past and just forgiving yourself, or you know, maybe even writing a letter of gratitude. So it really depends.
what feelings come up for people when they close chapter?
Okay. Before we go to that, right, I think I want to talk about the process of also knowing what chapter to close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so one thing that I realized is that because our society is so focused on like, you know, mental willpower, we when certain things come up from the past, we just kind of like, okay, let's not think about that, let's brush it away. Right? Most of us, we have memories from the past, and we try not to think about it. But from an energetic perspective, from what I see, if something from the past keeps coming up, there is something there that you need. So I had this friend who, no matter how much she achieved, she always felt like she wasn't good enough. But instead of looking at what's coming up for her, she just like brush it aside and be like, okay, let me run more workshops, let me do more of these things in order for me to feel that I'm worth it. And I just feel like when things come up, especially when they have like an emotional charge to it, like it makes you feel upset or angry, or there is a sense of guilt, then that is something to look at. So what comes up for people is that they may feel a different variety of emotions. So for example, for me, was that a very big chapter I had to close was from all the past relationships that I've been through, all the men that I have dated. And it was a very painful process because, you know, some of this I felt really hurt. I felt like I was abandoned. I felt like some of them just completely ghosted on me. And it was such a painful process, but I think of myself as, you know, the space holder. I don't want to avoid these difficult emotions. Some people are just like, oh, you know, positivity, let's go. But it doesn't work that way, because every emotion that comes up is actually important for us as human beings. You know, it's every single emotion has a message to share. And it's also important for us to, create this space so that they can come up safely. Otherwise, the emotion will always be stuck. It brings you back into the past, where then it comes up as like thoughts that always drag you back to your past. So I have another example for this. I have a friend who was, because of COVID, he was suddenly fired from his job. And he felt like it was like, wow, it's so shocking for him. And after that, he held a lot of bitterness towards the founders. And he was kind of like, he didn't see it coming. He saw it as like an act of betrayal. When he went on to his next two jobs later, he was always comparing the founders back to the founders that
He had
fired
to move on.
He didn't move on.
Yeah, he had
His
to-
mind was still living in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually that really spurred me to create this concept called closing chapters. Because no matter how good the job is in front of you, you can't see it. Because your mind just keeps bringing you back to the past.
And so the way to close it is like, forgiving yourself, doing a bunch of these things in order to let yourself know that whatever happened, but it doesn't need to be something you need to carry on into the present or the future.
Yes, exactly. And so there is this psychology effect called the Zeigarnik effect, where this psychologist, she was dining at a restaurant and she realized that the waiters could remember very, very complex orders with very complex customizations. And when the bill was paid, right, it's like it almost like completely disappeared from their mind. And then after that, she went back to the lab and she decided to do an experiment where she had two groups of people. One group of people, she made them complete the task. And then the other group of people, she interrupted them halfway. And guess which group was the one that couldn't stop thinking about the task?
The interrupter?
Yeah, it's the
Open loop,
interrupter.
eh?
It's an open loop. So actually our brain, open loops it doesn't serve us very well. These open loops, right, it's like, imagine your brain is a computer and you have like 50 tabs open and you're trying to reach for a new goal. You're trying to like pile on more onto your plate and you're wondering like, okay, I don't know why I cannot hit this goal. I feel really bad about myself. And then I go into like a cycle of like guilt and shame, starting to blame myself, like, why can't I do it? But actually, it has nothing to do with them at all. It's about, closing all those tabs that were left open. And then only when you start to, welcome the new, then only you have space to like welcome the new. Otherwise, your memory is like completely maxed out. There's no way that you can come up with more. How I see the whole process of this is certain chapters, maybe somebody betrayed you or like backstabbed you. And what's actually happening, right, is that you are going back in time as this present moment of yourself, as a more intelligent, wiser version of yourself, going back into the past and looking at what happened between these two parties. And kind of like, a lot of people think that like, okay, closing a chapter is about forgiving what the other person did to me. But actually, maybe that person don't even care about you at all. The person maybe has already like moved on with his life. He doesn't even care that he hurt you and things like that. It's about forgiving that version of yourself who didn't know what to do, who maybe used unhealthy ways to cope with what has happened. Just giving and holding that version of yourself with a lot of grace and love and compassion. So sometimes, like writing a letter or even just thinking back to the memory and sending love to that version of yourself is a way to close like all these chapters.
This is very good. Let's talk about three emotions you kind of mentioned just now: guilt, shame, and the feeling of not being good enough, which is quite common among folks that want to start their own business. So definitely not feeling good enough affects people's ability to put themselves out there. And it's kind of funny also because maybe to the external world, everyone feels that they are good at, but it's like never ever feel they are good enough. And then there's also like shame and guilt. Where do you think these emotions come from, and how do people overcome this?
So there's one thing that I haven't mentioned yet was certain memories that happened in the past, it shows up in our present moment, which is the example of I use of my friend like being fired suddenly. Actually, just noticing Singaporeans, there are a lot of Singaporeans actually deal with this kind of emotions. And being in a personal development space, we have tried to, work with all these things. But honestly, I see in a lot of people that actually it keeps coming up again.
Mm.
And I came to realize that there is one thing that a lot of people are not aware of, is that these emotions that we are carrying, right, is not from this lifetime. It's actually from our ancestry.
Mm.
And I'm going to explain. When we think about the forefathers that came to Singapore, our ancestors that came to Singapore, they come from China. What they did was they basically cut off all their family roots, and they believed that they could come to Singapore to find a better life. Because life in China was quite tough back then. But when they came to Singapore, what happened was that they were captured as slaves, and they had to like work as coolies, work like really hard. And resting in that point of time meant that you will be killed.
Mm.
And that's why we feel so much guilt towards, when we rest, we don't feel good and all that kind of thing, even though we try to like brush it off. But actually, all this a lot of it came from our ancestors, where we have to like work so hard, because working hard meant that it was for our survival. And how I see it is that as long as we are disconnected from our ancestry, not understanding what our ancestors had to go through in order for us to have this life today, we will never feel like we are grounded in what we do. And there's this scientist, right? They actually track the Holocaust survivors just to see how their children and their grandchildren, will behave. And they all carry the same fear, even though they've never been through all the killings and the wars, and it's passed down through epigenetics. And I can tell you that a lot of Singaporeans, they're actually carrying this, but it's not something that they really think about, or maybe they're not aware of in terms of how do they actually let go of this, and how do they actually, come to terms and peace with whatever has happened in the past.
Wow, I think, how do we overcome this?
I think it's really important to have a sense of connection to your ancestry. And the reason why I say this is because even on my own journey, I have traveled to so many places, done all the spirituality things, get high and things like that. But then I came to realize that sense of groundedness was always missing. No matter how many workshops I taught, no matter how many people I coached, there was always this sense of like, I feel like I'm kind of like floating. And then I went from like New Zealand to Peru to studying the Mayan cultures online. So these are all where all the indigenous people live, and they have such a strong connection to their culture. And that's where I realized like, oh, ancestry is the missing root. So what I did was I started to pick up on Taoism, and I do Tai Chi every single week. So every time I do this, I am connected to my ancestry, and I am honoring them in, everything that they've been through, because all these ancient civilizations, they have been alive for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and we cannot forget that. You know, whatever that they do, right, was because it's just for us to have this amazing life today. So it's in remembrance and in honor of what they did for us.
Wow! I think this is fascinating also. Let's take a look at the feeling you're not good enough, right? So apart from the epigenetics part also, where do you think that comes from? I think it's something to do with, let's think, Asian parenting coupled with, parenting elsewhere is very different. Notice that Asian parents always like to remind the child how they are not good enough also, no matter what the score is also. There's always a sense of comparison with other siblings, other friends. People are inborn with this idea that in comparison, they are never good enough, no matter what they have achieved. Have you noticed that? And how do you think people overcome that?
Yeah. Also, I feel like, it ties back into the story of like how I know that this culture is kind of like worldwide, but I'm just going to talk about Singapore. It also ties into, how Singapore kind of like started at the beginning, where we had to like work really hard, and just basically there was no room for error. The moment you slack off, your family is going to starve. They have nothing to eat. And that has just been carried on for generations. And when suddenly, there is a glimpse of getting your family out from this poverty cycle, it was to study in school. And that was the only way that you could get your family out of poverty. But times have changed already. But because I think during that period of time, there was just so much emotional pain, so much emotional trauma. Because like you're seeing people dying in the streets. That's like, I mean, we have it easy nowadays. It's not something that we see, but that was the kind of pain that people had to go through in the past. And I just felt like we as a society never really recovered from those times. That's why it's always about, you know,
Lack,
go to school. Yeah.
scarcity,
Because
worry, anxiety.
this was what we came, this is
Yeah,
what we
yeah,
came
yeah,
from.
yeah.
And yeah,
Is there a way out of this?
yeah. The way out of it is to study where Singapore came from and give gratitude to the ancestors that came. And find a way to practice whatever it is. Like recently I also had a friend asking me, it's like, oh, how can I, reconnect back to my ancestors? And as Chinese, we have so many things to kind of like choose from. We can learn about, I mean, for me, it's like Taoism and Tai Chi. People can learn about Qigong, they can learn about calligraphy, they can learn about tea. There's just so many options within this. That's how
Wow.
I see it.
What other internal identity slash inner resistance do you see in people that want to start their business? Because we have talked about quite a few today. We've talked about the source of guilt and shame and the not feeling good enough. We've talked about people that keep reliving chapters even though they're no longer that person in the past. We have talked about people who maybe see their business in a certain way. Then they might not be the healthiest frame, even after they achieve it or in the process of achieving it, are never happy. Achieve it, also not happy. It's like a lose-lose thing. What other internal resistance, identity struggles, or inner game issues you see people have?
I feel like another very common one is that the business is very tied to their ego. Like they're trying to grow into someone like a version that they kind of like envision. Like for example, it's like, oh, I want to be like a billion, like I want to make like millions of dollars. But actually all this is very driven by that's one of the bigger ones that I see. But it's not really truly in alignment with who they are and who they are meant to be. Yeah. And I think that with this very ego driven identity, everything that you build on just feels like it doesn't feel, it's almost like you are trying to like bust your way there, just to make yourself like feel good and all that. But I just feel like underlying there will always be this sense of emptiness or like, yeah, something just doesn't feel quite right. Yeah, because it's not in alignment with who they are meant to be.
So how does a person find alignment between the external, the internal, and then you mentioned the word very early on when we first started this also, the idea of intuition and
Yes.
going to a place also. So alignment, ego, intuition. How do we find alignment?
So I feel like alignment, I created this structure where alignment is found between, it's kind of like a dance between your mind, your heart, which is your intuition, and your body as well. Because the body is the one that is holding all the emotions that is coming up, either in the present moment or from the past. So it is a dance between these three that we will find your alignment. So intuition, I would say that, it's kind of like a language that the future version, the path that you're meant to walk in, because you are here in this present moment in time, and there is a future version of you who you're meant to be in this lifetime. And intuition is a way for that future version of you to communicate with you. That's the language that it speaks. But I think the problem comes when a lot of people, when they hear something intuitive, they'll be like, they will override with their minds and be like, no, no, no. Or like they start doubting themselves, or they start to be like, no, I'll just give a benefit of doubt. It's like, oh, this has worked in the past. I'm sure that this will like work again. So they kind of like drown out their intuition. Actually, all of us are very intuitive. It's just that are we tuned into that right channel? So traditionally, I think that also in the personal development space, a lot of it has been on mindset. And yes, I think it works. I think it works really well. But I feel like the true north compass. So imagine it to be kind of like in a triangle, and at the top is your heart, your intuition, and at the bottom you have your body and your mind. I feel like the true north compass is actually your heart. It's going to lead you in the right direction that you're meant to be walking. So I feel like we've kind of like gotten it wrong, where the mind is like the king, the mind is like everything. But actually it's the heart. It's the mind that serves the heart, not the other way.
Got it. Got it. Wow. So the heart speaks, but people need to be willing to listen.
It's actually speaking most of the time. It's just that we are so conditioned to use our minds to like override it. Let me give you an example. Have you ever met someone where you feel like their energy is a bit like off, or like the vibes is just like there's something off about that person?
A lot. I meet a lot of people.
Okay.
So,
And do you go like, okay, maybe I'll just give him a chance. I'll give him a benefit of the doubt.
I used to, but now I realize just like time doesn't make the underlying more aligned. That was what I kind of realized.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's not, it's not.
Yeah,
Time,
exactly.
time, if anything, makes it same or worse. Sometimes worse.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, when we meet someone and we feel like something is kind of like off, right? It's actually our body communicating that, hey, there's something wrong with this person. Or maybe it's like, we are not meant to like gel with one another. But I think a lot of people will be like, I will just give this person benefit of the doubt. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about this person. Yeah, and then we go and meet them, and then we just completely wasted our time and energy. But actually, we already know at the beginning. It's just a very split second where you'll be like, okay, you know what, I'm just going to push this feeling aside and my mind is going to take over and be like, okay, find out more about this person. But the people that you're meant to connect with, naturally, you will have a certain attraction towards them. You want to, curiosity, attraction, you want to like find out more about them. It's just like how you came across like Korean chapters. Like, I don't think that was a coincidence as well. It was something that drew you in.
How can a person shift, or do you believe people can shift their energy frequency, go from maybe a more negative density one to a more positive one, and just
Okay, so what I came to realize is that it's not about positive versus negative, because every single thing, right, is important as a human experience. It means that, so what I'm trying to say is that it's not that I always want to be happy. It's not that I always want to be positive. When I also want to embrace emotions such as like fear and anxiety. I don't want to push these emotions away because they're always trying to communicate with me something. So for example, last time, I always get angry very easily. And I always thought that it was bad to feel angry because I want to be peaceful, because that is, I don't want to cause trouble. I don't want people to like talk about me and be like, hey, why is this, woman such a asshole, or like whatever it is. Then I started to realize that in this anger, right, what it's trying to communicate with me is that my boundaries are being violated. And rather than, because I saw it as something that was bad, that was like negative, I shouldn't be feeling that way. And then I started to realize like, actually all these emotions, they are kind of neutral, there's no good and there's no bad. And interestingly, also in the Incas are the people who, it's an ancient civilization who built Machu Picchu. In their Quechua language, that's their original language, don't have words such as good or bad. Because no such thing exists. Everything is just a signal. And for them, how they describe energies is just light or dense energies. And this is the same for, I spoke to a Balinese guide once as well. He said the same thing as well. There's only light and dense energies. And dense energy doesn't mean that it's bad, doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just that there's something that is bothering you, you need to take a look at it. And then if it's something that you really need to get help with, that's when you go to maybe like a priest, or you do the water cleansing and things like that, or even like the salt therapy, go into the salt room and things like that. What you're doing is that you're clearing all these dense energies.
wow. What happens after a person clears and lightens it?
And they will feel better. They will feel lighter. They are able to see, the problems that they are dealing with from a different perspective.
Will they attract much better things into their life?
I think it's just having that awareness. The most important thing is not pushing these difficult or like negative emotions away. It's still being able to embrace them. But if, sometimes people just feel like it's way too heavy, that's when they should look for help. Yeah.
I think we mentioned quite a lot of inner stuff that people feel. And what would you say are the things that as people build their business or attempt to grow, and they work so much on the external marketing, the funnel side, etc., what do you think they should do internally so that they can build something that is, profitable, aligned?
So earlier on, I said that it is the mind that should be serving the heart. And One thing I realized about marketing and business is that people are always looking for systems or like structures to copy because it maybe has proven to be successful in certain yes, that works to maybe a certain extent, but I feel like if you really want to truly see exponential results, right, it's about who you are and what do you want, what serves you at the end of the day. I give you an example. So in the past, I was running energy management workshops, and I was kind of like doing this for a while. Then because I knew that like workshops were the only way that I knew, how I could share this with people and also monetize from it. The truth is that it was draining me. It was draining me so much that whenever I do one workshop, I will burn out for 1 month and then repeat again the next month and do the same thing again. And after that, I realized that, you know what, I know that, and in my entire career, it's always been about running workshops. But then I felt like at the end of the day, this is not sustainable for me. And then I started to remove myself from it, and I asked myself like, okay, what is the thing that will serve me at my most like highest purpose? What is the format that would help me much better? And that's when I went into the online space where I did like online webinars instead, or I just sold some sort of digital product. Yeah. So there is no one true method or one true way. At the end of the day, it's also about you and like how is the product like serving you. This strategies and structure is one way. It's turning inwards and saying like, okay, what structure serves me? What do I want? How can it serve me better? And then on the other hand, we also have the products that we come up with. Yes, we want to help other people, but it has to help ourselves as first. So the concept of closing chapters, the 21-day program was also a process to help me to close the chapters in the past because I'm doing it together with everyone as well. Yeah. So that's where do you see the difference between like it's something that's very hard led from like internal, and then once I figure out all this, and then my brain will come in to be like, okay, you want to do closing chapters, okay, let's do this, and we will figure out how to market this, what the words to use, what's the landing page, what the kind of content you're gonna come up with. So it's hard led first before my mind comes in to serve the heart.
So find a delivery that allows
that brings out
Yeah,
the best version of you.
Got it. Wow. All right. As we wrap up, this is we have covered a lot of very good ideas. I'm like mentally taking notes also. Any last words for our wonderful people watching?
I would say that, you are not a human doing, you are a human being, and you are a multi-dimensional being that is here to explore life completely. Don't treat yourself as a machine. You have so much more facets to yourself than you realize, and I hope that, eventually one day you'll be able to see how amazing.
I hope that was useful for you. I think we have a lot of wonderful concepts. I think at the same time we have covered so much of the way you see your business. I think closing off the chapters that are not serving you. I think at the same time where the source of not feeling good enough comes from, and being able to connect with like the ancestry, being able to listen to intuition. We talk a little bit about energy and like lightness and density. At the end of the day, finding a structure that kind of serves you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, if you guys like this kind of stuff, and whatever segment BB shares, comment below, let us know, and we look forward to bringing you some awesome, deep, useful conversations as you guys build your stuff. Thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you.
Until next time.